Okay, so today's daf yomi is Kesubos Kuf Aleph Kesubos 101. Says our Mishnah Hamima Enes. This is a girl who has refused the marriage. She was married off by her mother or her brothers, and she refuses the marriage before the age of 12. Or Ashnia, this is a marriage which is rabbinically prohibited. And it's like, for example, a grandmother and her grandson. By ilonis, this is a marriage where a person marries thinking that this woman is able to have children, but she's really biologically unable to. Ein lahen ksuba. In all these cases, these women do not get a ksuba. And also the mama'enes, because she was never married. The shnia, because the rabbis don't want that marriage to last. And the ilonis, because it was a mekachtos, it was a mistaken marriage. The little Peros, Rashi's first explanation is that she's not entitled to the benefits of the fruits which her husband takes as part of the Nechsei Maluk. She would be entitled to be redeemed from captivity. In this case, she doesn't get that. Below Mizono, she doesn't get ongoing support. Belows, she doesn't get to keep the worn out clothing. If at first she married expecting, if he married her expecting her, knowing that she was an ilonis, yesh la ksuva, then she would get the ksuva because he knew what he was getting into. Amano a kohen gadol, a widow to a kohen gadol, or a grusha v'chalutza a kohen hedjot, or a divorcee to a regular kohen, or mamzeres and asino Yisrael, or a mamzeres to a Yisrael, or bas Yisrael hanasin, or mamzer, or a daughter of a Jewish girl to a mamzer, yesh la ksuva. They get a ksuva. The Gemara in Yevamos explains that. What's the reason why they get ksuva? The Gemara explains in Yevamos that when the prohibition, the Gemara in Yevamos gives two reasons. One is that when the prohibition was biblical, the rabbis didn't need to strengthen it because the divrei Torah will tzrichim chizuk. Everybody's afraid of a biblical violation. But the rabbinic violations, the rabbis need to strengthen it by saying she doesn't get a knas. Or alternatively, since the offspring of these unions will be disqualified for the kahuna, the woman wouldn't want to do it until it's be the husband who convinced her to marry. And so therefore, the rabbis penalize him and not her. So the Gemara says, Rav says in a case where there was a rabbinic marriage of a katana, of a minor girl, yotza beget. Then Rav says she gets divorced. And we're in a case where she gets divorced with a get, where the husband divorces her, ein la ksuva. He doesn't have to give her a ksuva because it's a rabbinic marriage of a minor, so he doesn't have to give her a ksuva. V'kol shekain, and certainly in a case where she was mima'enes, that since the Rav says this rabbinic marriage is just considered like mafuta ba'alma, it's just considered like they just had a relationship, they weren't really married, he doesn't give her a get. And certainly in a case of mima'enes, whereas Shmuel Tani, where Shmuel taught Mima'enes ein la ksuva. Shmuel teaches that in a case of Mima'enes, she does not get a ksuva, but Yotze beget. But in a case where Shmuel says Mima'enes, where she rejects the marriage, she doesn't get a ksuva. But where he divorces her, yesh la ksuva. He does have to give her a ksuva. V'az the Shmuel tamei, and Shmuel follows his reasoning. The Amar Shmuel Mima'enes. Shmuel says Mima'enes does not get a ksuva, but Yotze beget. But if he divorces her, yesh la ksuva. He does have to give her a ksuva. Mima'enes. And then in the case of a mima'enes, then in the case of the mima'enes, so these are the teachings that Shmuel taught. Mima'enes does not have a ksuva, and Yotze beget does have a ksuva. Mima'enes lo pasal minach, and in the case where she rejects the marriage, so retroactively there was no marriage, so she's allowed to marry his brothers. Lo pasal minakun, she was never divorced, so she can marry a kohen. Yotze beget, but if he divorces her while she was a minor, pasal minach, and she can no longer marry his brothers. Pasal minakuna, and she can no longer marry a kohen because she's considered to be divorced. And then the third thing is mima'enes eina tzricha lahamtin shlosha chadashim. And if she rejects the marriage, she doesn't need to wait 3 months, which she normally would have to wait if she was divorced. But we're on top of kapal from an alf. But yotze beget. But if she was divorced, as a minor, tzricha lahamtin shlosha chadashim. Even as a minor, she'd have to wait 3 months because we're not going to draw a distinction between types of marriages. As long as she gets a get, she has to wait 3 months. Gemara says, "Oh my kamashma, what's Shmuel teaching us here? Tanina kuhu. We learned all these things. Didn't we learn that if somebody rejects a man who mutar b'krovosah, he's allowed to marry her relatives. We learned this in the Mishnah in Yevamos. If she rejects the man, he can marry her relatives. He mutaris b'krovav, and she can marry his relatives. The law pasal min kahuna, and she's not disqualified from marrying a Kohen. Meaning, say it's not a marriage. No, someone get, but if he divorced her, who asur b'krovosah, he's not allowed to marry her relatives. He asur b'krovav, and she can't marry his relatives. Who pasal min kahuna, and she's disqualified from marrying a Kohen in the case of a divorce. And tzricha lahamtin. So the Gemara says, so what's Shmuel teaching us? So Shmuel teaching us the din, and in the case of where he divorces her as a minor, even though she's a minor, tzricha lahamtin gimel chadashim. That's the case. The lo tanan, that wasn't learned in the Mishnah Yevamos, that he has to wait 3 months before marrying her. She has to wait 3 months before marrying again, even though she's a minor, and that was not taught in the Mishnah Yevamos. Gemara says, let us say that this is a dispute amongst the Tanaim, whether or not a girl who was divorced as a minor was married off by her mother or brothers, whether or not she gets a ksuva. Rabbi Eliezer taught that the actions of a minor are considered to be nothing. Meaning to say it's not considered marriage. And if we marry off a minor, it's not really marriage. And so therefore, so the husband does not get her. If she finds an object, the husband doesn't get it. He doesn't get her salary. He can't really revoke her vows. He can't inherit her. He can't become tummy for a freezer coin. He's not her wife. But what she does require miyun, she does require this rejection of the marriage if she wants to leave. Whereas that would seem to be that is like Rav. Whereas Rabbi Yoshua says ma'aseh katana klum, that is considered valid, the actions, the marrying off of a minor girl. So the husband does have the right to her found objects. Her salary, her vows. He can revoke it, be your shah, and he can inherit her, and he can become tamei for her. So the basic point is she's like his complete wife. But it's just that she can leave through a miyud. So let's say, says the Gemara, let's say that Rav must pass like Rabbi Eliezer, who says that the marriage is not a real marriage, therefore she leaves without a divorce. So let's say that Rav must hold like Rabbi Eliezer, Shmuel Damar, Rabbi Yoshua, and Shmuel says no, that she requires a divorce if the husband wants to divorce her, so therefore Shmuel must hold like Rabbi Yoshua. So the Gemara says, according to Rabbi Eliezer, nobody argues. Everybody agrees that Rabbi Eliezer says, like Rav, that it's not a full marriage, and she doesn't. There's no way that Shmuel could say like Rabbi Eliezer, because Shmuel says she requires a divorce, and Rabbi Eliezer says it's nothing. So there's no way to reconcile Shmuel's position with Rabbi Eliezer. But you can say that there's still a dispute. Aliba de Rabbi Yoshua, according to Rabbi Yoshua. Shmuel is clearly like Rabbi Yoshua because Shmuel says that it is a valid marriage, like Rabbi Yoshua. But you could even say that Rav is like Rabbi Yoshua. The Rav would say Ad Kan will come Rabbi Yoshua Hasam. Then why does Rabbi Yoshua say in that case that it is like a full marriage? That is midida lididei, from her to him, meaning to say the rights that he has in her assets. That is like a full marriage, meaning to say he gets her salary, he gets her lost objects, the objects she finds. Avol mididei lidida, but from her to him, meaning to say whether or not he has to give her a formal get, and a ksuba, the stipulations of a ksuba, all those things. Like the stipulations of a ksuba, that we're not going to say that he has to do. That's what Rav would say, because it's more likely that her family is going to want her to get married off, so she's provided for, and so therefore we incentivize it for him and not for her. So the Gemara says below is that the Mishnah had said that if she leaves, that a woman who rejects the marriage, she does not get the rights to the bu'os. The mema'enes, the shni, and the ilonis, they don't get the bu'os. That's the worn out garments, meaning to say they don't get back the garments that she brought in to the marriage and that were used, that the husband gets to keep them. Normally she would get them. In this case, she doesn't get them. So Amar Rav Huna bar Chila Rav Kahana, Amar Samish made the Shmuel. So Rav Huna bar Chila said to Rav Kahana, he said to us in the name of Shmuel, so he said, this law that she doesn't get back her worn out garments, those were only said with respect to those garments that were called Nichse Maluk. These Nichse Maluk garments, that under those garments, that they were prohibited for her husband to wear them and to wear them out, because they said that he only gets the payros, he gets the fruit of those garments, but not the principal. And he was required to sell those garments and to purchase with them something that would make a karen and payros, like we learned earlier in our tractate. And so, for example, he would have been required to purchase real estate with them. But those garments, which are called Tzom Barzel, which they designate as Tzom Barzel, i.e., he gives her a price for those garments when she brings them into the marriage, that the husband uses them, he gives her a promise. Well, that's basically, she's guaranteed that amount of money, so Isla, so that she does get back. So Havi Bey Rav Papa has a difficulty with this. On whose responsibility, on which of these three women does Shmuel say this teaching? That Shanu El B'Nechse Malug, B'Nechse Tzom Barzel, he gets it back. Which one of these three gets it back? And there's a distinction between the Nechse Malug and the Nechse Tzom Barzel. If you want to say that Shmuel was referring to the girl who rejected the marriage, if these garments are still in existence, whether they're garments of Nechse Malug or whether they're garments of Tzom Barzel, she should get them back. Because why should we penalize her? She's a Mima'anis, she gets them back. And if they're not in existence, then she can't take them. And so Ella must be Ilonis. It must be it's referring to the Ilonis. That's also not possible. If they're in existence, she, of course, why would she not be able to take them? And if they're not in existence, and if the garments are no longer in existence, or they went down in price, then just the opposite. If there's a way to distinguish between the Nechse Malug and the Nechse Tzom Barzel, you should have said the opposite. Nechse Malug de Bershusa Kaime, if it's as relates to Nechse Malug, because those are really hers, and he's not allowed to wear them. Isla, she should get those back because he acted improperly when he used them. And Nechse Tzom Barzel, the Lav Bershusa Kaime, but the Nechse Tzom Barzel, which are not in his domain, that he was the Lav Bershusa Kaime, they were not in her domain, and he was allowed to wear them. Then Leisla, then she should not get those back. Ela Shnia. So it refers to the case of the woman who was prohibited to get married by a rabbinic marriage. And the rabbis penalized the woman that she doesn't get what's coming to her, not the ksuva and not the mizonos and not the garments. And they also penalized him that he also has to give her what he thought is his. And so therefore the Nechse Tzom Barzel, which he used properly, so since she got married in a prohibited manner, they penalized him. And since he also got married in a prohibited manner, they also penalized her and him. So Amar Rav Shimi bar Ashi, Shmami Nami Rav Kahana. We learned from this statement of Rav Kahana, who said in the name of Shmuel that they penalized this Shnia, this second degree, that she doesn't get back the garments she doesn't get the garments back. If it was Nechse Malug, if it was Nechse Tzom Barzel, she does get it back. We learned from here that a woman who married kosher people, she does get back the worn out garments, even if they're no longer in existence, because the husband was not allowed to wear them out. And so therefore, so if she brought in a cloak, karnahavi, it's considered principal and not peros, and she gets that back. And so therefore, the husband is not allowed to use it and to wear it out until it gets worn out. But rather, he has to sell the garment, turn it into a principal, which gives peros, and use the peros. Gemara says, but is that really the case? But Rav Nachman himself said that this garment from the Nichsei Melug, that wearing it is the peiros, and the husband is allowed to use it. Gemara says, Rav Nachman pligi. Rav Nachman is arguing on this statement of Shmuel. They're allowed to argue. So now we had said in the Mishnah, they're both Hamoraim. Of course, they're allowed to argue. So what's even the Gemara's question? It's just saying that, yeah, there was no accepted practice there. So the Gemara says, we learned in the Mishnah, Ein Lahen, that the Mama'anes and the Shni and the Islanders do not get a ksuva. Amar Shmuel, Lo Shana, when do we say they don't get a ksuva? El Amana Umasayim. When do we say they don't get the ksuba? The standard ksuba of mana or masayim of 100, 200. Avol Tosefes Yeshlam, but they do get a Tosefes. They do get a Tosefes ksuba. And Tayanam Yachi, indeed, we also learned in the Brisa, Nashem Shamru Chachamim, these women who the sages said, Inlan ksuba. So that these women who the sages said don't get a ksuba could go to Hamimaenes v'chavrusel, like the Mamenes and her colleagues. Ein lai mana masayim avol tosefes yeshlam. They don't get the mana masayim, but they do get the additional parts. Rashi says this is like a gift. The chibas bia, and since they had the bia, this was a gift for the bia. But nashim shamru chachamim yotzel shelo b'ksuba, but kigon overes al das. But those women who the sages said they are divorced without a ksuva, and that you have to divorce them, not the women who said that they just don't get a ksuva, but those women who you have to divorce without a ksuva. Like, for example, the woman who is in violation of the halacha because she feeds her husband non-kosher food, and the similar people in that category. Ein and tosefes, they don't even get the additional part, the kol shekei mano masayim. For sure, they don't get the standard amount. Ayotzes mishum ra, and the woman who leaves because we assume that she was adulterous, no telas masha lefanah v'yotza. She takes her nichsei melug, whatever is remaining, and she leaves. Misayle or Rav Huna, this law, this teaching is a support for Rav Huna. The Amar Rav Huna, zinta, a woman who is adulterous, lo ifsida about lo. If Sida below Sakayamim, she doesn't lose, we're on the top of Kuf Aleph on the base, she doesn't lose her belows, her worn out garments, which are considered the Nechsei Melug, that are still in existence. Indeed, Tani Kameder Rav Nachman, and indeed, this was one of the Amoraim taught a Bryce in front of Rav Nachman, and he said, Zinta if Sida below Sakayamim, that this Amora taught this Bryce in front of Rav Nachman, and he said a woman was adulterous. Then her belows, i.e. her nichsei melug, her worn out garments, they're still going to, she still gets them. Excuse me, just the opposite. Zinta hifsida below sakayam. And when she was adulterous, she lost her. So this argues with Rav Huna, and according to this teaching, Rav Nachman is arguing with Rav Huna because he says she loses their garments that are still in existence. She loses a nichsei melug. Amar Layim, he zinta. So Rav Nachman, when this Tana said this in front of Rav Nachman responded, if she was adulterous, what did her clothing do? Meaning to say, why do you take away her clothing? And Tani lo if Sida below Sakayam. And so therefore Rav Nachman corrected him and said, no, you say the Brisa, she has not lost her worn out garments. So Amar Rav Barchanan, Amar Rav Yochanan, Divrei Rabbi Menachem, Sitim Ta'a. He said the teaching, you don't need to fix this brisa because these are the words of Rabbi Menachem, who is a stam, and they weren't stam. But the sages say zinta lo ifsida below sakayam. So Rabbi Menachem says she loses it, but the sages say she doesn't lose it. We also learned in the Mishnah, if the husband knows prior to the marriage that the woman is an Ilonis, and he marries her under those conditions, she gets the ksuva and gets all the Tanai ksuva. Amar Rav Huna, Ilonis, Isha, Ve'ena Isha. Amana Isha Gemara. So he says an Ilonis sometimes has the law of a wife, and sometimes has the law of not a wife. But the Kohen Gadol who marries a widow, then she is considered to be Isha Gemura. She's like his complete wife. What does it mean? Ionis Isha ve'enon Isha. What does it mean? Ionis like his wife and is not his wife. Is not his wife. Hikir ba, if he had relations with her, and he knew she was an Ionis, and there he still married her. Yesh Laksuva. She's like a complete wife. She gets a ksuva. She gets a ksuva. Lo hikir ba, but if he didn't realize she was his wife, he didn't realize she was an Ionis. Ein lo ksuva. She doesn't get a ksuva. Amana Isha Gemura, Almana, widow, is considered to be an Isha Gemura. Almana is considered to be his complete wife. Bein Ikerba, Bein Lo Ikerba, whether he knew she was an Almana or not, and she's still considered his wife, and Yesh Ksuba, she gets a Ksuba. Rav Yehuda says, Achazu v'achazu, whether it's an Ionis or Almana, sometimes Isha and sometimes they're Ein Isha. Sometimes they're wife, sometimes they're not a wife. Ikirba, if he knew she was an Ionis or Almana, Yesh Ksuba, then she gets the ksuva. But if he doesn't know that she was an Ionis or Amana, ksuva, she does not get the ksuva. Mer challenges Rav Huna, who says that Almana always gets a ksuva. Meisvei, we learned in a brisa, kinasa b'chaskas shekein. Let's say the Kohen Gadol marries her, and he told her she was a widow. V'nimtza shekein, and it discovers that she really is a widow. Yesh ksuva. We see that she gets the ksuva. Hastama. Doesn't that mean to say that if she didn't tell him in advance, elo ksuva, is that she doesn't get a ksuva? And doesn't this contradict what Rav Huna was teaching? The Gemara says no. Lo tema hastama elo ksuva. Don't draw that inference, but draw the inference. Ela ema kinasa b'chaska she'ina kain v'nimtza she'ikain elo ksuva. No, but read it as follows: if he married her under the impression that she was not a widow, and then he discovered she was a widow, then she does not get a ksuva. Avol stamamai. But if he married her when he didn't investigate, isla, she would get a ksuva. If that's the case, aditana b'chaska she'ikain. Well, why does the brisa say it? Why does the brisa say it like this? Why does it say that he married her knowing she was a widow? Aditana b'chaska she'ikain. V'nimtza shekein. Why does it teach her like that? That he married her knowing she was a widow, and it's true she was a widow. It should yesh ksuva l'shmin and stam. It should just say it as a stam. That if he married her not knowing anything, and then he discovered she's a widow, she gets a ksuva. V'kol shekein harm. For sure, if he married her knowing she's a widow, she should get her ksuva. So v'o tani kanasa biyadua v'nimtzeis biyadua. And furthermore, there's another brisa that we said he married her knowing she was a widow, and then he discovered she was indeed a widow. She gets a ksuva. But kanasa stam. But if he married her not knowing anything, elo ksuva. So if he married her not knowing anything, she wouldn't get a ksuva. Isn't this a refutation of Rav Huna? Tiyufto de Rav Huna. So why did Rav Huna make a mistake? Rav Huna mas nisin atise. Rav Huna got confused by the expression of the Mishnah, because he thought from the fact that our Mishnah said that the Ionis, if he knew she was an Ionis in advance, that she gets a ksuva. But it doesn't make that distinction by the Amana. They call the Amana, this teaches us by a widow, that even if he married her not knowing anything, she would get a few. We call the Amana few b'stama, even as a baseline, she would get a ksuva. V'loi, it's not the case. Kikatani la Amana apukta the Ionis kari. That which it says, the Mishnah of the law of the Amana, it was exactly to say the same distinction that he made by the Ionis is the same law with respect to the widow. Only if he knows in advance that she was Amana, then she gets a ksuva. But if he doesn't know, she doesn't get a ksuva. Hajanoach Almana nizones. And so now we say the next Mishnah says, I know it says Isha upaska imo kadesha yazun esbita chamesh shanim. A man marries a woman and he decides that he's going to support her daughter from a previous marriage for 5 years. Chayav lazuna chamesh shanim. Then he has to support her for 5 years. Let's say she divorced from this man, she marries another man, and she also stipulates with this new man that he has to divorce her daughter for 5 years. Chayiv lazuna chamesh shanim. Also, the second husband has to support her for 5 years. Holy Yomar Arishon, and the first one can't say, "Look, shetavo etzli adzuna." If she comes to live with me, I'll support her. He has to bring her the food to the place where her mother is. And also, the two of them can't combine. The two husbands can't say, "We'll combine to share the support." One gives her the food, and the other one gives her the money that's the equivalent of food. And so too, Nises Abal, if she gets married, Abal nosing on mizonos, her husband now has to support her. They have to continue to support her. So she could be getting supported by 3 sources there. Meisu, let's say the husbands die, then their daughters get supported by only the free and clear properties, the hinizones, but the state has to support this girl he committed to from the property that's a lien, that there's a lien on it. She's a creditor. But the people who are smart would write as follows. If he was smart, he could have said, "I'm going to support your daughter as long as we're still married." Then he could have written the document like that. Okay, we'll stop here. If anybody has any questions, address them